I am excited to introduce our first panel. We have Barbara Piermont, who is the Director of America's Ads Privacy and Go-to-Market Strategy here at Google. We have Andrew Graap, who has the longest title I've ever seen in my life. I was gonna try to make a joke and make an acronym out of it because we're at Google and that's how you do things, but I'm not even gonna try. But he is the Vice President and Privacy Officer in the US and the Associate General Counsel for L'Oreal as far as digital is concerned. So welcome, Andrew. And last but certainly not least, we have Ariscielle Novicio. She is the Chief Technology Officer and SVP of Product and Digital Strategy at the New York Post. So thank you all for joining us today, and excited to dive into the privacy conversation. So to start off, most of our guests here are marketers and advertisers. If there's one thing that they should be interested in or that they should understand from a privacy and compliance perspective, what would that be?
So at Google, we always think about like, what is the heart of why do we talk about privacy in the first place? Like, why are we all here in this room today? And that really stems from the user. So the user is at the center of this conversation because they are just so much more aware now of how their data is being collected, how it's being used, and how it's being stored online. And that's why we're seeing privacy regulation. And that's why we're seeing technologies changes rise to meet this user expectations. So when you think about privacy, you have to think about it from that consumer's mindset and make sure that when you're collecting consent, that it is clear and transparent that you are doing so and what you are doing with that information. And of course, very important, give them choices. Give them the option to opt out and make that something that's easy, not something that a lawyer would have to, dive into the details to say, how do I figure out how to even go about starting the process of saying no? So user first, always.
Make Andrew's job easier.
Yeah. That's what Google's here for, to just make all of your jobs easier.
Okay, so for me, everything that Barbara said, but also, like, you guys are representative of my internal customers as the CTO and as a member of like the privacy committee. So it's really important for me when I'm talking to marketers and to the advertising team that they actually understand some bit of like the regulations that are out there, how many states are impacted. I think about GDPR and I think about CCPA, for example, because they're the strictest. And then we talk about, as it relates to the consumer, both hats, right? What does it look like for you as a consumer? And then from the advertising and marketing point of view, like, what do I need to do to better serve my customer? Right, and that's a lot of like education. And the good news is there's a lot of information now. Like, I'm a fan of the IAPP. I go there all the time. I get updated. So I think it would be really good for everyone to understand that perspective, so you're less afraid of like what that means to your business.
And I'll just go from the compliance and more legal perspective. Obviously we have legal regulation issues. But again, at the heart of this and what's driving this is that it's a consumer centricity issue. It's an ethical issue. And when you go beyond just pure legal compliance and look at it from that perspective, a lot of these rationales start to make sense. And it really comes back down to transparency. Are you being clear? Are you saying and telling people in a clear, transparent way what you're doing? And then from the regulator perspective, they're going to say, okay, that's good if you're telling people X, Y, and Z, but are you actually doing what you're telling people that you say you are doing? That's often the biggest entry point for why litigation happens, regulatory investigations happen. There's a major disconnect between what you're publicly saying, whether in your privacy policy, your marketing materials, other things, and what is actually happening in the background of your MarTech, AdTech stack. And so, all of that needs to be wrapped together again in this kind of ethical frame. What are our company values? What do our customers expect? What do our other stakeholders expect? Because when you're talking about privacy, obviously this is a marketing conference, but as employees, we also have concerns about what companies do with the data. So it's an all-encompassing issue. It's not just legal compliance, it's IT, it's marketing, it's ethics. data governance. It's a really all holistic, all hands on deck kind of issue.
Do you sleep at night, Andrew? This sounds really stressful.
I was going to say, we're supposed to try to make this sound easy for them.
He's okay. He's doing okay.
No, we're good.
But the theme I'm hearing here, though, is the experience of the customer. And the purpose of all of this is not so you two can police or, drive the rest of the organization to do what you want to do, what's best from a legal perspective. It is in the best interest of the consumer. And, I think what I'm hearing is that you really need to be able to partner across your organization, and you all have the same goals. You want to, as marketers, we want to create the best experience for the consumer, and you as well on the privacy and technology side. So, Andrew, I'm gonna call you on again, but call on you again. But following up on a similar theme, how can marketers and advertisers best engage with you and your teams to make these things a little more seamless?
Sure, big piece that what I did now, I've been at L'Oreal for 5 years, and one of my huge efforts has always been establishing those relationships. I want to be invited to the meetings. I want to understand what you're doing. I want to understand your objectives. I want to understand the business plan. It gives me the context to make better recommendations, better evaluations of risk, but it also helps from a planning perspective. Again, we have a lot of work that has to be done, whether it's driven because of litigation, because of regulatory requirements, but not all of it necessarily based on your company needs to be done right away. There can be immediate needs, which are always driven by business requirements, context of the business, what are the business plans, other short-term objectives and things that may not be a priority right now. It's impossible to boil the ocean. And so the more that we can be involved early, we understand your strategic plans, and then as you start to execute those and we get into tactical issues, giving on us lead time, you're bringing on a new vendor, you're implementing part of that strategy, re-engaging with us with sufficient time so that it's not a crisis, it's not a fire drill. We can really dig into those issues. We can be that true partner. We can make recommendations. We can think of things that maybe you haven't thought of and make sure that, again, we're giving that seamless experience to the customer. We're respecting their rights. And again, we're being transparent. And the only way that can happen is if we understand what's actually going on in the background.
Yeah. Legal can really be your friend if you understand a little bit why you're thinking and making the decisions you are. Barbara, as far as platforms are concerned, how should organizations engage with platform providers like Google or others to really best accomplish the business needs that people like Ariscielle and Andrew are trying to solve for?
Yeah, I think not so dissimilar actually to what Andrew said about like CSS partners. It's the same with all of the platform providers that you guys are all working with. And as a good partner, you should have an open communication. And that means that you are able to ask the questions you need to ask in order for you to feel comfortable. So question them on what is their approach to privacy? What do they do with data? And ensure that their approach is aligned with your company's values and how you want to move forward in this new world. Now at Google, privacy is inherently important to us. And over the past few years, we have completely overhauled how we launch products and even how we decide to build a product in the first place. So we do not build or launch any product that is not first thought of from a privacy lens. So we ask ourselves, are these things that are going to be durable? Are they meeting the needs of current regulation or where we think regulators are going in the future? And most importantly, again, to what I first said, is do they meet the user's expectations? Because that is at the heart of things. Now, if you are working with Google, you may have noticed that we've already, within our ads platforms, started to move away from relying on third-party cookies. And rather, we are taking a more three-pronged approach. So we're investing in first-party data, AI, and then privacy-preserving technology like Privacy Sandbox, like Pair, like any other new technology that is going to be created because we are pushing the boundaries now of what digital advertising can do in this new landscape. And we're seeing that it can have payoffs. So that's what Google is doing. And if you need more details, we have a whole privacy specialist team, and your account teams would be more than happy to walk you through, because you need to feel comfortable with us. You need to understand that this is a trusted partnership that is here for the long term. And that is what you should be expecting of each and every platform or partner that you are working with.
Great. That's great to hear. On the context and on the topic of enforcement, Ariscielle, I'm going to throw this one over to you. In the U.S., we've seen a significant trend with increases in enforcement. I read recently that the CPPA, in a recent release, mentioned that their enforcement team is now at 80%, which I believe about a year ago it was only about 20. There are private rights of action that are being brought frequently. The FTC is stepping in to enforce privacy violations. From an operational perspective, how do you believe organizations can be more proactive in mitigating their risk with the increased focus on enforcement?
Sure. I mean, I think, Barbara, you touched on privacy by design, right? So we've had, I'm going to say we've had it, right? We've had, like, it's a friend of ours, right? We've had CCPA around since January 1st, 2020. So we've been at this for 4 years and 9 months, right? At this point, we've implemented the processes. We have as imagine everybody does, a consent management platform. We have a privacy committee that consists of technology, the business, heavy on the legal team and the legal and compliance team. And we meet pretty regularly to ensure that the maturity of our privacy program is exactly where we need it to be, right? So when we think about enforcement of CCPA is at 80%, like operationalizing it really means alignment within the business, right? Having a framework for how you audit, how you capture data, you use data, your consent platform, transparency, opt-in, opt-out, whatever that is for the specific state or region. I feel really confident that with what we have in place and with even like now we're like heavy into auditing ourselves and checking against what's industry standard to make sure that there's a continuous program of knowing that even when enforcement comes into play, we feel really good about the practices that we have internally.
Andrew, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think I would just say, again, kind of the business context matters too, and also paying attention closely to what the regulators are saying, paying close attention to what the litigators are actually litigating, and then, looking to what your customers are saying. I found our customer care teams are a great resource about what our customers are actually concerned about. They may identify, let's say, maybe an unsubscribe button on an email is not working, and then you can remediate those things. But not everything is necessarily going to be a priority for your company. Again, that context matters. The CPRA regs are, 100 pages? The Colorado regs are 40, 50 pages. I mean, there's a lot of material in there, and it is a major project. And again, you cannot boil the ocean. So paying attention to what the regulators are telling us and then focusing your areas or your priorities on what the regulators have identified as important, handle those first, and then cascade the rest.
Yeah, you want to kind of be able to read the tea leaves a little bit. I know there have been recent regulations introduced in Maryland and Virginia, and I think a year ago we were looking at maybe 12 states with clear privacy laws, and now we're at about almost 19. So it's changing very rapidly. So I think you've both laid out really great operational frameworks, and again, the theme I'm hearing is talk to more people in the organization, educate and train the organization, and bring them along is really, really the best way.
Can I add to that point too?
Sure.
It is so fragmented right now that when you're looking at your organizational structure, it's really important to have someone or some people who are dedicated to this, because it is not something that can be an afterthought. It is not something that can be done in someone's 20% time. This is extremely complex, and we are seeing that like the repercussions of getting it wrong, not just from like a regulatory fine standpoint, they can actually make you lose your customers as well when you
Bad
get this
PR,
wrong.
yeah.
You know, it's pretty serious. People would be very quick to leave if there was a data breach or that they felt that their privacy wasn't there. So you're going to want to look around within your team and say, where can I put people? What team should they sit? But you're going to want to carve out dedication towards this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just on the fragmented, it's not even the comprehensive privacy laws. We've also seen a flurry of child-focused bills, and there's been a flurry of state-level laws regulating SMS marketing. And these states are now turning into the hotbed for plaintiffs. You never would have thought that Oklahoma is going to be SMS lawsuit central, but now they're finding people in Oklahoma thanks to a very strict SMS law. So it's just a very fragmented regulatory environment.
Yeah, Andrew just gave you the crystal ball. Child regulation is next.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna like add one more thing. Like the other thing too is like don't be afraid to, which I do and my team does all the time, run into the legal and compliance team if you have like a specific use case, right? So when you were talking about context, I'm always in my legal team's office saying, hey, I have this new thing I'm thinking about. It's gonna collect data. Here are the data points. What do I need to worry about, right? You need to continuously do that.
Yeah, yeah. We've recently seen a lot of platforms introduce features to kind of, at least it seems to support advertisers in making these decisions. When your technology is designed to help you make things easier, that ends up being better for the advertiser and ultimately the consumer from an experience standpoint. So, Barbara, I know Google has introduced this in many platforms, like specifically when we think about restricted data processing and GA and things like that. Can you share some of the philosophy behind this and how advertisers can really lean in and benefit?
Yeah, I mean, the philosophy here is really simple. It's how can we as Google help our customers abide and comply with various state regulations when they're using our platforms. This is complex. It is fragmented. We want to make the areas where we can make it simpler. Now, again, still not a simple process. There are various products and platforms within Google that we will operate as a controller at times, and we will operate as a processor in times. So some of our products like Google Analytics or DV3, we're already limiting the use of data and only using it for a very specific purpose that you tell us to. Now, that is not the case for our whole suite. So like, Google Ads, for example, where that is an example of a time where it doesn't operate under restricted data processing. And you as the customer would have to tell us if you would like us to limit that data in that case, where we would become a processor rather than a controller. And for this, you can do it actually on a per user basis and say just for this individual, or you can say, hey, I'm just going to blanket turn on restricted data processing for all impressions within a given state. But that's a control that you have. And certainly if you have privacy folks or what we're seeing very more common these days in the US that stem from EMEA, a DPO or a data protection officer who wants to know more about how does which Google products operate in what way, what do I need to do in order to minimize my data? Have conversations with us. Reach out to our privacy teams. Reach out to your account teams. We are more than happy to sit down and walk you through the process so that you feel comfortable and can ensure that this complies with what you as an organization needs.
And Andrew, being on the general counsel and legal side and Ariscielle on the CTO technology side, I imagine this creates an opportunity for your orgs to kind of work together and, if you can inform legal of what the tech is capable of and what controls have, Andrew can make better decisions. Are you operating that way currently in your respective orgs?
Yeah, I get from my perspective, these are tools and they are useful tools. The one caveat I would say is especially for other platforms, we will not mention their names. We're here, but like they also have these flags, but the limitation is they only apply those flags if they detect an IP address from a certain state. And so the New York Attorney General issued a publication not too long ago that said, look, if you are relying solely on these tools, that tool does not work in the state of New York. A lot of these platforms will not recognize. So that consumer, they think they're opting out of targeted ads. Your Metas, your TikToks, they will not recognize that flag in the state of New York. You have now just deceived that consumer. So again, it gets back to understanding the limitations and benefits, and they are very beneficial. And then again, being very transparent with your consumers about the effect of these tools and the effect of these flags that are now available.
And for us at the New York Post, we've been working really closely with our legal teams from the beginning. So our legal teams are in every technology decision process with us, and we think about our DPA. We also think about consent as soon as we onboard a new partner or we're trying a new technology. Both teams are really tightly integrated when it comes to implementing anything that has any risk of data, or any use of data or data capture. So we're pretty integrated.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm going to talk about AI because why not? Because we're at Google, and it's the abbreviation of the year, I guess I'll say. But with Marty's presentation, we opened the day with a discussion about AI and how that can be leveraged for marketing and advertising outcomes. And there are a lot of AI features in these platforms today, embedded AI and platform AI. And there are a lot of promises as to what AI can drive in a lot of these platforms, but in a lot of the conversations I have with advertisers and marketers, it's scary. There's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to AI, and how can we really drive adoption and comfort with these tools so marketers can really, as I said earlier, push the envelope and try something new while feeling really comfortable with what they have available to them. And I'll throw that to all of you.
All right, we're at Google AI. If you hadn't known, Sundar Pichai, our CEO, back in 2016 said that Google was an AI-first company, and that's something that we've really taken to heart. I think a lot of times, people talk about, oh, this is new technology that's really scary. This isn't new technology.
We just started talking about it.
Yeah.
It got a new publicist.
It got a new publicist. I like to say AI has, whoever publicized Kale is now on AI.
Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow's behind AI.
Yes, thank you.
Hot take.
So there are elements that are new too, like generative AI is much newer, and especially leveraging that from an ad capacity, that's new. But at Google, we've been using these types of platforms and technology within our products for years now. You might have seen this in Maps. You might have seen this on search. When you type something in, it will auto-complete that for you. That's AI. You've also seen it within your ad platforms. Things like customer match, things like enhanced conversions. This is all leveraging technology that enables you to do more, but with less. So you don't have to collect as much data as you used to have, because it is not a more is more situation. You want to be smart about the data that you collect, and AI lets you fill in those gaps. We then have been applying the same stringent concerns that we take with our own first-party data and applying that to the data that you as a customer would be putting into our systems, because we want to make sure that that data is secure. So we will only do with that data what you've told us that we can. So, enhanced conversions is a great example of that. When you upload your data to leverage enhanced conversions, that's a measurement tool. That's supposed to be able to understand how your conversions actually performed so that you can do more effective bidding. When you upload that data, we will only use it for measurement purposes unless you specifically tell us that we should take some sort of additional action on it. So we're applying those same strict rulings. And we've seen really great results. There's a case study we can send out after that we did with Mason Market. But they analyzed what happened when they were leveraging AI, and they analyzed their enhanced conversions, and they ended up seeing a 91% lift in their ROAS for campaigns that had enhanced conversions tied to it. So that's really impressive. So certainly we want to make sure that we are meaningfully adopting these technologies rather than being scared about it, asking the right questions if you are concerned, and then analyzing the results. Because this is the type of technology that the future of digital advertising is going to be built on. 30 years from now, they'll be talking about like the person who invented AI. Lots of people take credit for that, so I'm not going to name names here. But like that's going to be the thing, and this is going to be the point in time that we're all referencing in the future.
Yeah, it sounds like, from a platform perspective, you're really taking the approach of really understanding the jobs that your customers need to do, the whole idea of the jobs to be done theory. So if you can leverage AI to make things easier, it's not necessarily
Easier, smarter, more effective, all of the above.
It's not necessarily just creating these features and functionalities just for the sake of it, to have a shiny new toy. The approach really should be, here's how this is going to make things better when you deal with signal loss, when the bridge starts to crumble. You have these tools to turn to. Andrew at Ariscielle, have you started testing these tools, or embedded AI going to be your one thing that you leave with today?
Yeah, just from our perspective, I mean, as you said, these tools have been around for years, and sometimes they've been running, and you may not even know about it. Google's had them, Commerce Cloud has had them, Einstein, things like that. I think what's exciting now is with Gen AI is really identifying and coming up with what's your purpose of using it and having an identified purpose. If it's efficiency, I think there are a lot of internal tools that really can help marketers. Instead of having somebody write a blog post, maybe you can give some inputs into a tool and, have them generate a blog post, have them rewrite product descriptions on your e-commerce pages, things like that. A lot of time-saving and efficiency-saving tools. The caveat is always, again, they are still prone to hallucination. You do just have to check and do your same reviews as if a human had written that copy. But there are a lot of good internal tools to save time. The caveat would be if you're going external and putting something LLM in front of consumers, making sure that you're doing that in a thoughtful way. I think a lot of times where companies get in trouble, it is a little bit of the shiny object syndrome. We've seen the issues of a Chevy dealership that let their chatbot negotiate cars, sold a Silverado for $1. That's obviously not good.
Not a great negotiator.
No, there was a religious organization that had a chatbot that was telling people they could baptize children with Gatorade. So it's just, it's being deliberate and thoughtful. And there are examples. I think Walmart has a very good search function on their app now that's powered by Gen AI. So there are good examples of people doing it in a very thoughtful, deliberate way, and just be mindful of the pitfalls.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, as a CTO, right, and a technology person for as long as I can remember, the good news is, I think about AI the same way I think about any new tech that's coming to our organization, right? So as a technologist, there's a framework. You bring in a new tech. You make sure there's a business need. You test it out. You're thoughtful about it. There's user testing. There's QA, right? So it's pretty straightforward for me. But to answer your question earlier, we are very deep into testing out the new technology.
Yeah. That's a really great point. I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, the operational framework for bringing these on and working together, it's really no different than any other tool you would bring to your stack. And so I think maybe we need to stop giving the publicist of AI so much credit and just think about it in the context of how you would think about any other tool that you bring to your organization. We have just a couple minutes left, so to kind of drive us towards a wrap up, how can you, I guess what I'll say is, we know that advertisers have traditionally looked at privacy as a blocker and a constraint to be able to reach some of their goals. How can you go about challenging this belief? And then, how can we really drive a better relationship across privacy and marketing and advertising in general?
For some reason, there's this meme in the industry that privacy and performance can like not coexist together. Like you can have one or you can have the other.
Sean Downey does not agree with that.
Sean Downey does not agree with that. Barbara Piermont does not agree with that. I'm sure a lot of people actually in this room do not agree with that. Privacy and performance are not at odds. That is our mantra, and I swear Sean and I probably do go to bed thinking that. But like it's been proven time and time again that these two things can coexist, and not just coexist, they actually can support one another in terms of having better performance. So you need to go out and test. You need to see for yourself. You need to do the analysis and the incrementality test to see that that meme is wrong. Like we've had customers who have taken their first party data that they have responsibly gathered thanks to foundational tagging, and they've implemented it into our system, leveraged AI, used customer match, and we're seeing really strong performance. Again, another case study for you guys. I'm going to send you them all after. But like TurboTax, when they implemented customer match, they saw a 14% increase in their click-through rate and a 19% higher conversion rate. These are real results. When you are thinking about the consumer and being conscientious of their privacy while also using new technology that represents like the modern marketer versus like the legacy technology that was meant to remember what is in your shopping cart, that is when you're going to break through. That is when you're going to see that upward trajectory and no longer be a trend, but be a thought starter, be the future. Be that rocket ship of growth, and that's what we've been seeing, and we just need more people to adopt it, to embrace it, and take a look at it and be like, all right, fine, you're right.
Say no to the mesothelioma ads.
Exactly.
Basically. Any last thoughts from you, Andrew and Ariscielle?
No, I mean, I think it just gets back to ethics. I mean, if you focus solely on legal compliance, you're going to miss the big picture. It's really how do you want to be treated? Treat your customers the way that you would want to be treated, and a lot of this starts to make intuitive sense. And what you'll see is, you know, now companies have an obligation to publish their consumer request stats in California. And so you can look and you can say if a company's had an issue, they've been in the news, maybe they're not known as you know, solid on privacy, their requests are far going to be excessive compared to a company that is known as being, you know, more privacy friendly. So by treating it that way, you know, your customers are going to trust you. They're not going to opt out as much. They're going to be more willing to agree because they know that you are a good steward of their, you know, their information.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to ethics and customer centricity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me just say, it's not an easy problem to solve, right? Like I'm a publisher, and I'm coming from that angle on logged in users, registered users, users who have chosen to give me their data, and we're deliberate about it and intent-based, right? And then I have a huge portion of my audience that may or may not want to give me their data, but that's a huge portion. But the good news is I feel like that's been internally for us, and I think for everyone here, an opportunity to really think about, like, how do I want to engage with my user and what's my value proposition? So they're coming here because they want to. They're giving me their data because they like what I have to offer. And that's like a new switch in my head where I'm like, I need to be really deliberate about who I am and how I'm showing up for that customer who chooses to come to me, right? And hook them.
Yeah. It, you know, all goes back to, we all want this idea of advertising Eden, but if we put the customer at, we say customer Eden, what is going to be the best for the customer? You will inherently make the right choices and drive that performance. So thank you all. This is really, really beneficial. I hope you're all inspired. Maybe you have your one thing you're going to try. Maybe make friends with legal, take them out to coffee. Yeah, I really appreciate all of your insight, and you know, platforms continuing to think about the customer as well are your friend. So thank you, Barbara, as well. And yeah.
Thank you.